Welcome to the Ethical Hacking Masterclass course. This is a complete course which will make you a complete ethical hacker. So, in the first section of ethical hacking, that is the introduction to ethical hacking, we will learn different terminologies, penetration testing methodologies, and much more. Let us start with the first lecture, which is the key terms in hacking. In this lecture, we will learn what is an asset, what is a vulnerability, exploit, risks, and threats. So, let us get started. What is an asset? An asset is any device, data, or other component of the environment that supports information related activities that should be protected from anyone besides the people that are allowed to view or manipulate the data or information. In information security and computer security, asset is any data that is of utmost importance. So, asset can be from a people, a person, a device, a code, or anything. Assets should be protected from illicit access, use, disclosure, alteration, destruction, and theft. The next is vulnerability. Vulnerability is defined as a flaw or weakness inside the asset that could be used to gain unauthorized access to it. The successful compromise of vulnerability may result in data manipulation, privilege elevation, exploitation, etc. In cybersecurity, a vulnerability is a weakness which can be exploited by a cyber attack to gain unauthorized access. To exploit a vulnerability, an attacker must be able to connect to the computer system. Vulnerabilities examples are cross-site scripting, SQL injection, buffer overflows, and others. We are going to see all these in our next sections. Now, what is a threat? A threat represents a possible danger to the computer system. It represents something that an organization doesn't want to happen. A successful exploitation of a vulnerability is a threat. A threat may be a malicious hacker who is trying to gain unauthorized access to an asset. Anything that can exploit a vulnerability intentionally or accidentally and obtain damage or destroy an asset is also known as a threat. A threat is what we are trying to protect against. Common types of threats are natural threats, unintentional threats, and intentional threats. Natural threats can be floods, hurricanes, or tornadoes. Unintentional threats can be like an employee mistakenly accessing the wrong information. Yes, that can be a threat. And intentional threats are hackers, spywares, malware, adware, or the actions of a disgruntled employee. The next one is exploit. An exploit is something that takes advantage of a vulnerability in an asset to cause unintended or anticipated behavior in a targeted system, which should then allow an attacker to gain access to data or information. Exploitation is actually the next step in an attacker's playbook after finding a vulnerability. Exploits are the means through which a vulnerability can be leveraged for malicious activity. Although exploits can occur in a variety of ways, one common method is for exploits to be launched from malicious websites. The victim might visit such a site by accident, or they might be tricked into clicking onto a link to the malicious site. Risk. A risk is defined as the impact resulting from the successful compromise of an asset. For example, an organization running a vulnerable Apache Tomcat server poses a threat to our organization, and the damage or loss that is caused to the asset is defined as the risk. Risk can also be defined as the potential for loss, damage, or destruction of an asset as a result of threat exploiting a vulnerability. Now, all of these terms we have seen previously. So, reduce the potential for risk by creating and implementing a risk management plan is very essential. Risk is the intersection of assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. Why is it important to understand the difference between these terms? See, if you do not understand the differences, you will never understand the true risk to assess. You see, when conducting a risk assessment, The formula that is used to determine the risk is A plus T plus V is equal to R, which means asset plus threat plus vulnerability is equal to risk. Attack. A cyber attack is an attack launched from one or more computers against another computer, multiple computers, or networks. Cyber attacks can be broken down into two broad types. First, the attacks where the goal is to disable the target computer or knock it offline. Or the second, attacks where the goal is to get access to the target's computer's data and then perhaps gain admin privileges on it. Now, depending upon the criminal intent, a cyber attack can be a random or a targeted attack. Cyber attack methods seem to rotate in order to throw an organization off their defenses. The famous cyber attacks examples are WannaCry and NotPetya. Then crypto miners attacks made headlines in 2018, and in 2019, cyber attacks have been a mixed bag. Phishing email cyber attacks remain the constant thorn for most of the organizations. So this was all for this lecture. In the next lecture, we will see what is meant by a penetration test, then we will see what is vulnerability assessment, and we will see the difference between vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, and finally we will see what is meant by a vulnerability assessment penetration testing.